This is a summary of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The play opens with two servants talking about how they hate the Montagues. They meet two servants from the house of Montague, and a fight breaks out. The scene is just showing how much the Montagues and Capulets really hate each other. Paris visits Lord Capulet to ask for Juliet's hand in marriage. He tells him she is too young, but instead he should throw a ball. Romeo gets an invite and agrees because he wants to see a girl he is in love with, Rosaline. Juliet is getting ready for the ball. Meanwhile, Lady Capulet and the nurse are trying to convince her she should marry Paris. Romeo is having second thoughts about going to the ball because he is depressed about Rosaline, but his friends eventually convince him to go. Romeo arrives at the ball, and Tybalt, a Capulet, is offended by his presence, but is stopped from confronting him. Meanwhile, Romeo and Juliet meet at the ball. They kiss, and once they find out who each other are, they are separated. Act 2. Romeo climbs over the orchard wall into the Capulet's garden, while his friends are looking for him. Romeo watches Juliet in her window, and on her balcony from down below. They talk and decide to marry the next day. Romeo goes to see Friar Lawrence to tell him he wants to marry Juliet, and he agrees, thinking this will end the feud between the two families. Romeo's friends find out Romeo has been challenged to a duel by Tybalt, and that he is a very good swordsman. He returns home, and they tease him for being in such a good mood. Juliet's nurse arrives, and Romeo tells her he wants to marry her and to meet her at Friar Lawrence's that afternoon. The nurse returns home reluctantly and tells Juliet of Romeo's proposal and to visit Friar Lawrence that afternoon. Romeo and Juliet meet, and Friar Lawrence marries them. Act 3. Tybalt arrives looking to fight Romeo, but he refuses, saying they are now related and shouldn't. A fight breaks out between Mercutio, Romeo's friend, and Tybalt, who kills him. In revenge for his death, Romeo kills Tybalt and then is exiled. The nurse tells Juliet about Tybalt's death, and she is immediately frustrated with Romeo, but remembers that he is her husband and forgives him. Romeo is hiding with Friar Lawrence and is given the news that he is banished. Then the nurse arrives with the news that Juliet still loves him, and he decides he wants to see her one last time. Paris visits Lord Capulet again, and they decide they want to get married in 3 days. Romeo and Juliet say goodbye to each other, and her family tells Juliet that she has to marry Paris, so she decides to visit Friar Lawrence. Act 4. Paris visits Friar Lawrence in order to plan his own wedding, but then sees Juliet there. Once he left, Juliet threatens to kill herself if Friar Lawrence did not help her, so he provides a potion that would make her appear dead. Juliet returns to her family and begs for forgiveness from her father, and he welcomes her back. Juliet is forced to take the potion earlier than they planned due to the wedding date. She is unsure that Friar Lawrence had given her poison or a potion, but she takes it anyway and immediately appears dead. The Capulet household prepares for the wedding. The nurse discovers the body, and her entire family finds out, and so they now prepare for a funeral in place of the wedding. Act 5. Romeo discovers Juliet has died, and so he buys some poison. Friar Lawrence gets the news that Romeo did not get the message that Juliet was not dead, and he worries what would happen. While Paris was visiting Juliet, Romeo arrives, and he kills him. Then Romeo sees Juliet's body, and he kills himself. Friar Lawrence arrives just as Juliet wakes up, but he has to leave her behind. Juliet sees Romeo dead, and so takes his dagger and kills herself. Their families grieve and finally decide to end the feud between them. The end.